The situation is stabilized. Police say the situation was stabilized an hour after initial calls came in. The situation was stabilized and the little black boy was found dead. After the street corner was placed on lockdown and the people were warned to stay away, the situation was stabilized until another day. Little boys blew from blowing horns, sounding alarms, crying, "Hear me, hear me, hear me." They are not stabilized because the volumes of the talking heads keeps getting louder and louder. "Be quiet, Anderson Cooper," they yell in loud whispers because they don't know why there's no sun up in the sky. Because if the rocket's red glare keeps bursting in air, they will have to silence the lambs for good. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. They yell loudly, like a moth to a flame. Burns, burns, burns like a ring of fire. Burns like a man in black, armed and dangerous, like a menace to society from a place where nothing like this should happen, because we know it's always us, it's never them. It's always us, it's never them, or it's weapons of mass destruction living in neighborhoods devoid of white picket fences, so we can't keep the boogeyman out. And anyway, the boogeyman is a quiet, unassuming police officer who shoots bullets like raindrops on roses at a pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, boom, boom, pap. We all fall down the rabbit hole of disbelief that this is happening in our zip code now. What do we do when the Sandman comes for you? You mobilize the troops. You fight fire with fire. You burn the mother down. You stabilize the situation so the revolution can be televised with tiny sound bites delivered by Wolf Blitzer, who's now tap dancing with Anderson Cooper while riding shotgun in this souped up ride of another deja vu moment in time where nothing, absolutely nothing is stabilized. We are not stabilized. We are not stabilized. This situation is not stabilized. We are victims of circumstances we cannot understand, so we fear because this shouldn't happen here. Not here in Indianapolis, New Orleans, Ferguson, Tucson, Atlanta, Gary, Chicago, Muncie, Decatur, Watts, Seattle, DC, Detroit, Madison, New York. Fill in the blank, 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 blank. Hello, my name is Angela Jackson Brown. I am a professor of English at Ball State University. I also teach creative writing. I'm a novelist, a poet, and a playwright. Today I want to talk to you about spoken word. The poem that you just heard, "The Situation is Stabilized," is a poem that I wrote in reaction to a lot of different things that are going on right now in our society. And I wanted to use that poem as a means of showing just what it means to be a spoken word poet, as opposed to a poet who writes traditional poems that are meant to be read, but oftentimes are poems that are written specifically to be seen visually on the page. Spoken word, not always the case. So some things to remember. Choose a subject and have passion about that subject. In order for you to be a spoken word poet, it has to be a topic that you have extreme passion about. There are so many issues that are important to me, and those are the types of poems that I focus on when I'm trying to write something for the purpose of performance. So you think about the fact that spoken word is something that's meant to be performed. So it's not just you standing up and reading from the page, but it's you bringing your emotions and your energy to the reading. And the only way you can do that is if you're writing about and reading about and speaking about things that are important to you. Another important thing is that although a lot of people think that spoken word artists don't use the same devices as those who write poetry that's meant to be in books and meant to be in journals. That's not the case. As you heard in that poem, I use many of the same things that you find in other traditional poems. The repetition of certain lines, the use of rhyming, the cadence of the poem. You would notice if you read it, it reads from the page very much like I read it, because I use the techniques that I learned from traditional poetry in order to make sure that whether I'm reading it or someone else is reading it, they're going to almost be forced to read it with the same cadence that I use. Another important thing about if you're going to be a spoken word poet is the art of performing. I've never had formal training as an actress, but I did grow up in the Baptist church, where I was taught by my Sunday school teacher that elocution is important. Miss Jackson is what she always said. Make sure that you enunciate your words. Make sure that you make eye contact with the people you are speaking to, because if you don't make a connection with your audience, then they're not going to feel a connection to the work that you are performing. So that's very important. Projection, making sure that your voice carries as you're speaking your words. And then of course, your facial expressions can be another part of it. Unlike poetry in a book or a poetry in a journal, it's really left up to the reader to figure out what the intentions were for the author. Well, with spoken word, you know it because you're getting it straight from the mouth of the performer or the poet. So you know what the intent, or you should know what their intent. You should know if they are expressing something that makes them angry, or if they're expressing something that makes them feel sexy, or if they're expressing something that makes them feel happy. You should be able to figure all of those things out, not just by the words that they are speaking, but also by how they present themselves on stage. Hand gestures. You probably noticed as I was speaking my poem that there were times when I used certain hand gestures to emphasize certain parts of the poem. For example, when I was talking about, you know, the police officers and the boom boom pap, the importance of making sure that you create a visual representation of the poem as well as a vocal presentation. And then finally, the importance of memorizing as much or all of your poem. I'm still working on committing this piece to memory. As you notice, I was reading parts, but a large part of it I really have committed to memory, because that then allows you the freedom to step away from the pages. And then you can use everything. You can use your hand. You can use your face. You can make eye contact with someone in the audience and connect with them. But when you're so married to the page and having to stay focused on every word, then you lose some of the performance aspect. So this is still a work in progress. So I kind of gave you a glimpse into me still working on committing this piece to memory. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to perform it without the aid of my written text. So those are a few tips on spoken word. Really, at the end of the day, bring to the table your emotions, your feelings. Write about things that you care about, things that you think are important, not just to you, but to other people, and then figure out how best to present that to your audience. Have a nice day.